Good day to you one and all. It is I, Justin Hawkins, and this is Justin Hawkins Rides Again. Today is an incredibly sad one. I'm going to be talking about Roy Thomas Baker, legendary producer. We often talk about people's achievements after they die, and Roy Thomas Baker achieved so much in his life. It's impossible to mention his name without attaching it to so many others like Queen, Ozzy Osbourne, Guns N' Roses, Foreigner, Lindsey Buckingham, The Cars, Cheap Trick, and countless others. But I want to talk about Roy as the individual that I knew who helped me and my band in a moment when there was an awful lot of pressure on us to achieve, and the experience of working with this complete legend. It's really sad that he passed away, so this is my tribute to Roy Thomas Baker. Justin Hawkins rides again. There's no way Roy would have accepted that vocal, but there it is. I'm getting away with murder now. Okay, so if you look at any of the headlines about Roy Thomas Baker's death, you'll see things like hit-making producer, Queen legend, legendary Bohemian Rhapsody producer, and there's a recurring theme which is his work with Queen and specifically on Bohemian Rhapsody. As the most streamed song of the 20th century, it's maybe not surprising that it does dominate news about Roy, and it's something that he was often asked about.
Okay, I've lost another Galileo.
So this is the Queen, the story of Bohemian Rhapsody, which was a 2004 BBC documentary. I was actually there when they recorded this. Let's have a look.
He'd have little scraps of paper everywhere with little things and little Galileos here. So it was all written down on, just on paper and pencil. It seemed like it was a bit haphazard, but it wasn't. It was very, very hard. But we didn't mind because we knew we were setting certain trends that then eventually technology caught up with us. So that was pretty good.
Oh my God, I haven't heard him speak for such a long time. It's quite emotional, actually. Oh my God. Oh God, yeah. So I mean, I remember when they filmed that documentary, and Roy required quite a lot of comforting afterwards, because I think just opening up that session and talking about those experiences was really a lot for him, because he's so emotionally invested in everything that he did. Now, we took part in that documentary, I think, just as things were sort of blowing up for The Darkness After Permission to Land. But I think I'd actually met Roy quite a long time before he started working with us. I think we were in the Sunset Marquee. It used to be that sort of legendary rock and roll hotel in Los Angeles, and there were a few people there who may have been interested in were orbiting the darkness because they were sort of interested in working with us on our next thing, that whatever the follow-up was to be to the first record, which had been really successful. And the guy that I zeroed in on was Roy Thomas Baker. I thought he was brilliant. Like, we just got together and we had a great laugh, and it was kind of like, I remember saying to him, so Roy, if you're not doing much in the next few months, would you be up for perhaps producing The Darkness? And he goes, well, duh. And that was one of his catchphrases, really. That's kind of how he spoke. But he was eloquent, brilliant musical vocabulary. He had a great way of sort of expressing what he needed from us, using vernacular that we all understood. And everybody in The Darkness at that time had a sort of varying degrees of sort of, I suppose, what's the word? Some of us were at different levels in terms of, our understanding of theory, and we weren't always able to express it or understand it, but he had a great way of communicating. And the most important thing was that we just had a fucking great laugh the whole time. So the way he did it was, instead of just sort of like rocking up to the studio and then it's the first time you encountered a producer after the initial kind of meal or whatever it is that you have, Roy and his wife Terry came out on the road with us for the arena tour that happened at the end of 2004. So we were still actually promoting the first record when Roy came on board. He was with us throughout the UK, probably for bits of Europe, and definitely across America as well. So like the first kind of proper long run that we did in America, he was on the tour bus with us. And there was a moment, there was a moment on the first album campaign, where like a lot of people in America think that The Darkness was a one-hit wonder. In England, of course, we built up the campaign differently. So we had like other songs that were gradually sort of getting higher in the charts and making our, you know, lining up all the ducks for when we pulled the trigger and released I Believe in a Thing Called Love. But in America, because because the music industry wasn't interested in the early part of, weren't interested in us in the early part of our career. It was really, we forced the issue by doing these independent releases. So when we finally signed to a major label, there was an obligation to do an international release that was coordinated for the big single. So that meant that in America it started off with I Believe in a Thing Called Love, and on that record the only way to go from there is down. And I really fought that. I was kind of like, can we not release I Believe in a Thing Called Love first in America? Because if we do that, they'll think we're a one-hit wonder, and they didn't listen to me. They wanted it to be an international coordinated effort, and they were saying things like, well, Growing on Me is a better song, which might be true, obviously that's a subjective thing to observe, but what they wanted to do was then do Get Your Hands Off My Woman, which we'd released as the first single from that record, as this sort of attention-grabbing rock radio, got a load of swearing in it, and it's a bit wild and it's a bit fast, and you definitely can't call it radio-friendly. But they wanted to do that, so we re-recorded that song with Roy Thomas Baker whilst on the road in America. So we had like a couple of days downtime, stuck in the middle of America somewhere. I can't remember where we actually recorded it, but we went and did a new version of Get Your Hands Off that was more sort of mixed and produced in a radio-friendly way for the Americas, with a view to sort of prolonging the shelf life of that first album. It didn't work because obviously it never was going to. Like the hit on that record was the hit. But I do remember the way he worked was kind of like he loved dynamic, real-time. Because I think it's been around since before automation existed on these old mixing desks. So every channel strip had a set of parameters that you can interfere with, and then there was faders that you manually had to move around. So if there was a drum fill, he would move the toms up, and if there was like vocal parts that needed to sort of fade in and stuff, he'd be like that. And so every time you ran a pass of a mix, it would be an actual live performance by Roy Thomas Baker, and he'd be like moving stuff around with his fingers as the thing went down to the master tape. Very, very old school, and a completely different type of talent to what's required to nowadays when you make a record. All that automation stuff is programmable. You can focus on one channel at a time, and you can just sit back and watch the faders move. But it wasn't like that with Roy. He was hands-on in a literal sense when those things were happening. And the really fun thing about that recording of Get Your Hands Off My Woman was it was being mixed by another producer that I very much admire called Kevin Shirley, who I think makes some of the greatest sounding rock records there are. He worked on Aerosmith's 9 Lives and the Roadstar record, which I think sounds amazing. And he really knows how to do like an SSL desk kind of, great sounding rock record. But the experience of listening to Kevin Shirley, who also did How the West Was Won, the Led Zeppelin live stuff. The experience of listening to a Kevin Shirley mix is quite a linear one. Everything sounds amazing and it's always in your face and it's great. But Roy's like bringing stuff in, and what he described as getting away with murder, with sort of pushing stuff and interfering with dynamics in a way that I don't think I've ever seen any other producer do. Like wildly kind of wild leaps in terms of how things came in and out and the volumes of things. And so we had these two really contrasting approaches to a mix, and they were both sitting at the desk together. Every time there was a particular drum fill happening, Roy would sort of reach over and push up the appropriate faders, and then as soon as Roy turned his back, Kevin Shirley would bring them back down again, and they were bickering the whole time. It was amazing to watch these two visionaries with completely contrasting mixed philosophies working together. I loved Roy. I absolutely loved him. Roy was 78 years old when he died. He started working in the music industry when he was a teenager, and that's a lifetime when you think about how many artists he actually worked with, encouraged, nurtured, helped, laughed with, most importantly. It's really hard to include everything in an episode without it sounding like a Wikipedia entry, and I don't think that's appropriate here. But he was prolific. So he started his career at Decca in the 60s, And he went on to assist in engineering recordings by Elton John. So he was working with Gus Dudgeon in the olden days. That's where he cut his teeth, and I think that's where he encountered people like Paul Buckmaster, who's an unbelievable string arranger who obviously worked on David Bowie with him, the Rolling Stones, The Who, Dusty Springfield, Moody Blues. I was named after the singer from Moody Blues, Justin Hayward. Nazareth. And then he worked up to chief engineer. So he did T-Rex's Bang a Gong, Get It On, Freeze, All Right Now. These are really iconic recordings when you think about it. And then he progressed to producing 5 albums of Queen, 4 with the Cars, and many others, including Journey, Foreigner. Oh, he did my favourite Foreigner one, the one that's got Hot Blooded on it. That's an unbelievable sounding record. And actually, when you listen to the drum sound, you recognise it's him. Alice Cooper, Cheap Trick, Devo, Motley Crue, Ozzy Osbourne, The Stranglers, Sammy Hagar, T'Pau. I didn't realise that one actually. And the Smashing Pumpkins. I think he did the Smashing Pumpkins just after he did The Darkness. And I remember bumping into Billy Corgan and talking to him about Roy and what to expect. I was just kind of, I think I said to Billy Corgan at the time, it's like, whatever you want to do, Roy Thomas Baker will find a way to make it work. On that record that we did together, I had this appalling panpipe synthesizer sound, and I played this kind of solo bit over I think it was a mellotron sort of vocal choir chord. And then, so like, if we're doing panpipes, we'll get the best panpipe guy in the world. So, because some of the notes that I'd played in that sort of synthesizer solo don't exist on the traditional panpipe, they had to build a panpipe which included those notes so that he could play it. Then he played it and sent it to us, and we put it in the track. I mean, it was anything goes. I mean, the other thing is, like, if you want to get like an interesting timbre to your vocal in a modern recording environment, what you might do is you might sort of get some sort of EQ plug-in and interfere with, you know, the bandwidth and spike a certain area, cut bits out. But we needed an interesting vocal sound for like the sort of wordless vocal refrain that happens in a song called Hazel Eyes. And the way we did that was an SM58 microphone, which is, you know, you don't often see people using those in studios because there's better responsive capsules available to you in a microphone collection in a professional recording facility. But he would put an SM58 inside a champagne bucket, and we always had plenty of those around. So to get that sort of weird tinny sound, and it was just really effective. So he was always finding like practical, real life ways to achieve sounds instead of relying on plugins. He used to call Pro Tools slow toys, and was very much old school. I think we bought all of the tape that existed in the country to make that record, because it's probably one of the last records where you would have been able to use tape in that way. Anyway, so when you're listening to things like Don't Stop Me Now, or My Best Friend's Girl, or Just What I Needed, or Wheel in the Sky, you're actually listening to the work of Roy Thomas Baker. And the names go on: Metallica, Simply Red, Yellow, Peter Schilling, 10,000 Maniacs. They were all signed to Elektra when Roy was the head of A&R there. And he worked with us. I remember when we were on tour with him, like that, before we even sort of began to sort of collate material for the second record, he was listening to the way the band operates in a live setting, and he realised from listening to the way Ed drums and the more sympathetic sources around his kit that I think at one point in a sound check, I remember Roy being underneath the drum riser, and he recognised that a really great place to record Ed's drums would be to have a microphone, at least one microphone, underneath the drum set. So when we recorded the drums in Rockfield, it was on a riser, and then he had microphones underneath it and all around it. And I think the engineers that watch this channel will recognise that that can present a lot of issues with phasing. You know, like if there's two microphones capturing the same sound source and they're out of phase somehow, then you can lose the sound altogether. So it took a long time for him to get that drum sound. And it's really powerful. It's really natural sounding. It's just like there's microphones all around it. And underneath it, weirdly. Probably behind it too. I can remember him sort of like putting his head inside the bass drum to to mic it up in the traditional way, and then Ed hitting the bass drum without considering the fact that Roy had his head inside the bass drum at the moment. And that was the first time I saw him really lose his temper. It was really funny. It was funny. I mean, but he didn't go deaf. He was still able to. He had sensational ears, despite moments like that. You meet a lot of producers as well who have this thing where if they haven't directly produced the thing, then they're a little bit snide about other people's work. But after we'd worked on that album together, whenever I did anything, I would always kind of meet up with him and play it to him and see what he thought of it. And I'd ask him for advice on things like mastering and mixing and things like that as well. And he'd always be like, I actually think he helped Dan, my brother Dan, to plan and build the studio that he used to run, the Leader's Farm in East Anglia, a commercial studio that was kind of designed around specifications that my father and Roy Thomas Baker worked on together. So he was always like just so generous with his time and his expertise, and he'd always just sort of do what he could to make our musical existence smoother and more effective. He was just a wonderful man. I really, really loved him. Anyway, on Instagram, Brian May wrote, Roy was a part of our production team from the very beginning, up to and including the album A Night at the Opera. We then parted company for A Day at the Races, but reunited for the Jazz album, and the Jazz album is my favourite Queen record. That's not what Brian May said, that's what I say. Roy's production contribution, along with Mike Stone's engineering for Bohemian Rhapsody, will never be forgotten. I regret slipping out of touch latterly with Roy. I suppose life moves at such a pace these days that we imagine there will be plenty of time to rekindle a friendship, and then suddenly one day it's too late. Thank you, Roy, for all the great work you did for us and all the fun we had. Rest in peace, Bri. Well, I think that's a lovely bit of wisdom there from Brian May. I think that's true, isn't it? Like if you haven't been in touch with a friend for a long time and you're in any way concerned about them, reach out, go and say hi. Roy Thomas Baker has left us now, but he was a fucking legend. On that second record for us, we didn't give ourselves any time to write great songs. I don't think there are great songs on that album, but the experience of producing it was so special. We met all of the big names. We more or less could have worked with anybody we wanted. And we had dinner with some of the really elite producers that have only made hits over the last God knows how long. But Roy was the one that excited us because we knew we didn't have the material. I think in our hearts we kind of knew that the songs weren't as good as the first record. And we also knew that in an industry where fewer and fewer people are actually buying records, and that change was starting to happen back then. We started working on that record with him properly in 2005. So we knew that it was our only opportunity to really throw the kitchen sink at it. It was an expensive record because we did everything. We did everything we felt like. And there were certain days when we would go in and then Roy would be like, right, caviar? And then he'd go and cook blinis and we'd get all the accoutrements. And there was definitely more than one day when we just sat there and ate caviar and drank champagne and laughed. And that was the atmosphere that we were working in. It was good for I suppose it was good for our mental health, actually. It might not have been too good for our livers, but by God, it was such a fucking laugh. Roy was a force of nature and a really amazing individual. Probably the greatest engineer and the most, I don't know how to put this, I suppose the most tenacious producer I've ever encountered, in that he would chase every idea, every tangential meandering, he would just chase it down, realize it to its greatest potential, and then if at the end of that process we went nah, didn't matter, just got rid of it and we just moved on to something else. So yeah, a legend has left us. Really, it is a sad day, and I don't make him like that anymore. He was fucking wonderful. So to my darling Roy and to Terry, love you guys, and I'm devastated. It's really sad news. I will oh my God, I'll always remember you. Yeah, that's it. I'll always remember you, Roy. one of my favourite people I've ever met. And, whoa, God, watching that thing, just watching the footage of him talking is just, he was so funny and so cool and so wonderful. I wish I could kiss you on the cheeks once more. So yes, rest in peace, Roy. Well done. Fantastic achievements, an amazing career, superb person, really, really inspiring in so many different ways, and absolutely dedicated to the musical and creative existence. That's a life lived in service of music and musicians like myself. I was very, very lucky to work with Roy, and I'll never forget it. Thanks, guys. Justin Hawkins rides again. I also remember going to a restaurant and he ordered a steak that was, he wanted it rare. It came perhaps just slightly medium rare. And he said, and he didn't say this to be mean to the waiter. He said this to make him laugh, and it worked. I said rare, not fucking cremated. Brilliant. Guy's a genius. Right, I love you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, watch one of these 2 videos, listen to the oeuvre of Roy Thomas Baker. They should have knighted him. It should be Sir Roy Thomas Baker. If you can do that posthumously, that's what should happen. One of the all-time greats, if not the all-time greatest. All right, lots of love. Look after each other. And if you're thinking about somebody you haven't spoken to for a while, get on the phone. Reach out. All right, all the best. See you on the ice, guys.